Unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica from the scrapbooks of Adrian Freighter. In former times, when one went to a high-profile football match at Jarrett Park in Montego Bay, one could always expect a range of emotions from rival fans, as it was no secret that back then the West had arguably the most passionate football fans in Jamaica. While there were rarely fights in the stands, hurling abuse at the police and match officials was like a daily ritual, especially if the team being supported was on the losing end. After the game, the range of emotions would again be on full display, as supporters of the winning team usually were filled with glee, while the losers would be crestfallen to the point of even refusing to speak to their own friends. In one unforgettable game in 1996, a daCosta Cup clash between arch-rivals Montego Bay's pride and joy Cornwall College and Lucy's all-powerful Rusea High School, the emotions got so high that it erupted in violence, with irate spectators throwing missiles on the field from the main concrete stand. During the melee, some members of the security forces began firing shots in the air to quell the situation. When the situation calmed down, it was discovered that a Montego Bay taxi operator, Derrick Reid, had suffered a bullet wound to his chest and had died in his seat. All hell broke loose when it was found out that Reid was shot, as angry spectators flattened a section of the perimeter fence around Jarrett Park and turned their wrath on a district constable they claimed they had seen pointing a .38 revolver in the stand during the initial melee. Police had to use tear gas to keep back the angry mob before whipping their colleague away as he protested his innocence. It was easily one of the scariest scenes ever seen at Jarrett Park, as tears and bad words flow in unison, as it sank in that, unlike other spectators who would be going home to their families that evening, the unfortunate Reid was heading off to the morgue through no fault of his own. In this edition of Lest You Forget, I will be revisiting the unfortunate incident from a story I wrote for the Gleaner, which was published on October 31st, 1996, under the headline, Death in the Park, Man Killed at daCosta Cup Match, and a subsequent column I wrote under the headline, It Could Have Been Avoided. A spectator was allegedly shot and killed by a policeman at Jarrett Park yesterday afternoon when crowd violence erupted, forcing a premature end to the crucial daCosta Cup interzone game between champions Cornwall College and Group 2 leaders Rusea. The dead man who was shot in the chest has been identified as taxi operator Derrick Reid of a Montego Bay address. He was pronounced dead on arrival at the Cornwall Regional Hospital. The trouble started in the dying moments of the game, with the teams locked at 0-0. A fight broke out in the main concrete stand, and suddenly all hell broke loose as missiles were being hurled from all directions, forcing spectators to flee. During the melee, a shot was heard, and Reid, who was in the stand, was hit. Fans reacted angrily, pelting the lawmen with bottles and stones. The police retaliated by firing shots into the air and using tear gas to disperse the crowd. The policeman who allegedly fired the fatal bullet had to be secured in the park's pavilion as angry fans demanded his head. He was eventually whisked away in a police car, which was partially damaged by missiles as it sped away. A senior police officer who was at the park promised that an impartial investigation will be carried out. Rusea's assistant coach, Anthony Williams, and Dr. Dean Weatherly, Cornwall College's coach, both described the scenario as a major blot on football in the West. Yesterday's incident was reminiscent of a disturbance which occurred at Jarrett Park last year when a Ben Francis football game between Port Antonio and Cornwall College was marred by spectator violence, resulting in Port Antonio refusing to return to Jarrett Park for the daCosta Cup semi-final. Port Antonio was subsequently banned for a year, forcing them to miss this season's competition. In the column I subsequently wrote, I stated the following: though it was a shooting incident that sparked the full-scale riot which erupted at the park and later in downtown Montego Bay. It should be noted that unruly spectators and improper deployment of security personnel, especially in the stand where Reid was killed, also contributed to the breakdown of law and order. While there has never been a shortage of police officers at major games at Jarrett Park, police tend to show more interest in the games than in security. Probably a cue should be taken from football crazy England, whose police officers' backs are noticeable turn to the action at Premier League games so that they can better monitor what is happening in the stands. It should be noted that the policeman who was accused of firing the fatal shot was subsequently cleared, as it was ruled that the .38 he was carrying did not have the range to travel all the way up the stand to where Reid was sitting. In looking back at that unfortunate scenario which cost Reid his life, it was definitely one of those unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica. Unforgettable stories out of Western Jamaica from the scrapbooks of Adrian Freighter. Like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.